Good morning, everyone. Some awful news, terrible news. My deepest condolences to the family. Remembrance Day death. Toronto shouldn't forget. Shot 12-year-old boy dies. The other day I said he wasn't shot to death, and unfortunately he did pass away. And that's, man, it makes me sad and it's gut-wrenching because of the loss of potential. That poor family, that poor boy. And I don't know. I don't know how you stay in Toronto. You know, I don't know. I don't like going to Toronto. I've said it a lot. I backed down on it like 2 shows ago, three shows ago, and then 2 shows ago I said no way, this is insane. I can't believe how out of control it is. It's unfortunate because it doesn't seem like it's staying in Toronto either. Here's Laurie Goldstein. He says Ontario rejected its own public health agency advice when it launched its color-coded plan for COVID-19 restrictions. Public Health Ontario recommended 4 levels of control measures, the strictest red with a threshold of a weekly infection rate of 25 cases per 100,000 people and a lab test positivity rate of 2.5%. The plan set a threshold 4 times higher, 100 cases per 100,000 and 10%. So I've said before that the doctors don't, or the leaders don't have to listen to the doctors' recommendations, and based on that, they have to balance what's right for the public. So these news articles that I'm going to read are assuming that the doctors are 100% right and the politicians not listening to them is 100% wrong. And that's not a politician's job. A politician's job is to lead effectively and is to balance the risks reward, right? Oh, I'm having work done on my house. So if you hear big bangs, that's what's going on. So apologies. Anyway, so a politician's job is kind of to balance things, right? And to do the best they can with the information they've got, which if you ask me, they're doing a poor job with the information they've got currently. But regardless of that, these guys are trying to make a big deal of the government having a 4 times higher threshold than what the doctors want. And realistically, I think that the threshold that the province has set is still way too low and needs to be much higher, especially when you look at the deaths and the death rate. And we will look at that because I think that that's important. Here's Jennifer Yang, and she says the province rejected its own public health agency's advice when it launched its framework for COVID-19 restrictions. A member of the health measures table didn't see the final plan until it was publicly released. So they're doing everything, double-barreled shotgun. They're doing everything they can to push more lockdowns, say that the doctors are 100% right, and the politicians, how dare they not listen to the doctors? The doctors told us to lock down, so we've got to lock down. The province rejected advice from its own public health agency when it created its new color framework. The executive leading the organization's pandemic response says she only learned of the crucial details when they were released publicly last week, the Star has learned. Health Minister Christine Elliott told reporters Friday that the framework was designed after full consultation and advice from 2 expert advisory groups, the Public Health Measures Table and the Modeling Consensus Table, as well as Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams. But one group said it was never consulted, and a member of the other group said she never saw the final plan before it was released. In interviews with the Star, they described the framework's controls as insufficient to contain the spread of the virus, putting Ontario's healthcare system and its most vulnerable citizens at risk. PHO provided advice for 4 levels of control measures to move into the strictest level short of a full lockdown, a category now known as red or control. PHO recommended a threshold of a weekly infection rate of 25 cases per 100,000 and a lab test positivity rate of 2.5%, Deek said. But in the final plan, which Deek said she saw only last Tuesday, the thresholds were set 4 times higher at 100 cases per 100,000 and 10%. That surprised me, she said in an interview, adding that she stands by the thresholds PHO advised back in September. I'm not in agreement with the indicators as they are currently written in the framework. Beat Sander, co-chair of the Ontario COVID-19 Modeling Consensus Table. Modeling Consensus Table. Don't you love when science just comes to a consensus? We're all in agreement here that you're wrong. Get out. Said Minister Elliott misspoke at the Friday press conference when she said members of her group had provided advice. The Modeling Consensus Table was not consulted, said Sander, a scientist at the University Health Network in Canada, research chair in economics of infectious disease, adding that she and other members of the scientific community were surprised by the plan. I'm surprised by the fact that we have a Modeling Consensus Table. Like, can we all agree that this is what's going to happen? Yeah, we all agree. Can we all agree that these are the assumptions we should agree with to start with? Yes, okay, we should agree. I mean, like, the assumptions are the things that make the model kind of run, right? Like if your beginning assumptions are wrong and consensus, groupthink is wrong. If you all agree around a table, find somebody who disagrees because they may just deflate your entire plan, right? Like never mind. There's all sorts of examples of groupthink being absolutely a terrible idea. So let's having a group of people come together with the express purpose of coming to a consensus. For modeling and ignoring the history. Don't pay attention to the history of what's happened. What's happened has happened. That's history. Modeling is about the future. Don't you? You want to know about the future, don't you? Now I'm just filling time for these tabs to load. Hold on. It's like watching a magician whose express job what it is to distract you with one hand while he's getting the ball out of his pocket with the other. Anyway, back to this. So let me get this straight, says Yardley Eden. All the projections were wrong because all the assumptions were wrong, but we still can't go outside because the people who were wrong said so. That about right? Yep, that's about right. Here's the model, and the blue line is the actual. Right? Ontario, actual in the model. We're just crossing the low scenario threshold a month into it. We've just touched it. We just touched the green line, and we're bang on the green line low scenario right now. We're nowhere near what they said back then would be a catastrophic risk of hurting our healthcare system. And yet, what Ontario's new modeling for the COVID-19 second wave can and can't tell us. Ontario will release updated modeling on Thursday, that's today, forecasting the course of its second wave of COVID-19 as some epidemiologists already project the province will surpass 2,000 new cases per day by early December. Their models have been wrong. Okay, well, I mean, I guess we're at the low model now. Their model, but we're nowhere near the high model, right? But they're saying, 2,000 cases by mid-December. Projection, modeling, the future, right? This comes as Ontario sees a renewed surge in infections despite recent comments by Premier Doug Ford suggesting the pandemic curve is flattening or going down. Over the past week, Ontario has reported daily averages of more than 1,200 new confirmed cases of COVID-19, and on 4 of the past 5 days, the province broke its previous single-day record. Based on the growth rate of the new cases in early November, Ontario is on track for 2,000 cases a day around December 1st, according to recent projections by the COVID-19 Modeling Collaborative. These names are great, eh? I mean that in if you were writing a post-apocalyptic graphic novel that I'm imagining in my head. It's like Watchmen, right? And the agencies are named not too evil organization, right? Like the Modeling Collaborative. Let's model together. Work by this group, which includes scientists and physicians from the University of Toronto, University Health Network, and Sunnybrook Hospital, has fed into the province's own modeling forecasts. Yes, who cares about what's happened? Let's model the future. Given the policies that we have in place right now, I don't think there's any reason to conclude that we wouldn't reach 2,000 cases a day. I don't see why not. An infectious disease epidemiologist at the University of Toronto Dalla Lana School of Public Health, who is not part of the Modeling Collaborative team. And we'd have to start seeing a huge change in terms of restrictions that we have in place to not hit 2,000, said Tudi in an interview with CBC News. We're on this trajectory and we're not doing enough at this point to change this trajectory. She's not in any position to say this. Just she's a epidemiologist at the university, right? She's not part of the modeling team. And even people on the modeling team. I mean, let's see all of your assumptions. Open up, make your model open source, and let's see it all, right? Back to this. The modeling, I scroll down. The modeling is expected to show not only the projected trend of new cases, but also the potential implications for Ontario's hospitals. The latest provincial figures released Wednesday show 424 hospital patients with COVID-19, including 88 in intensive care. An average of 2,000 cases per day would put Ontario on the cusp of a critical benchmark. This is assuming that they are right and 2,000 cases per day and it's on the cusp of a critical benchmark. You would think, right now, it's November 12th, you would think that you would find what bottlenecks there were of this potential critical benchmark and remove those bottlenecks. Do your best to staff those wings or whatever, right? To make sure that you can continue to run whatever you need to run. But instead, this is just sounds like fear, right? It just sounds like, oh no, the boogeyman is coming and he's going to be here in 2 weeks. Ooh. And it's always 2 weeks away, always 2 weeks away. The modeling, the graphs I did, I'll show you the graphs that I did, but the intensive care has remained pretty much the same. It was between 80 and 90 before, and I think it's 88 today. Back to this anyway. And 88 in intensive care. Oh yeah, right, 88 today. It does. Back to this. An average of 2,000 cases per day. Oh yeah, critical benchmark over the course of the week. That works out to 96 new cases per 100,000 population. The province's official threshold for red zone restrictions is 100 cases per week. 100 cases weekly per 100,000 population. So they've changed the red mark to be in line with 2,000 cases a day, and yet like we're nowhere near. Well, here's the all-cause mortality again. I'll show it because it makes sense to show it. But here's the deaths. Boom. Sorry. It didn't load. But here's the deaths when it does load. Evidently, I have a lot of tabs today, so they keep going to sleep on me. Here's the deaths. Yesterday, there was 15 deaths reported, but if you get context about those deaths, 12 of them were from long-term care. And I've been talking about, how does COVID-19 kill you? And it basically weakens you to the point where something else kills you, right? Like, or I don't know if it weakens you to that point, but that's kind of how it works, how I've gathered that it kills you. So it's a very interesting to just attribute blanket all deaths to COVID when there are usually a lot of deaths that happen in long-term care homes. And not to minimize those deaths. The death's a tragedy, man. But the lost potential, and I mean the lost potential for the people who have lots of family visiting and who are lonely and miss their families, and like that's lost potential. Those are lost hours, and there's not much time left, right? You can't make that time up. It's a tragedy. It is a self-imposed tragedy. It is. Here's Roy Green, and he says, China, population 1.4 billion, ranking 59 in nations for COVID-19. People's Republic of China claims total 86,284 cases, 17 new, 0 new deaths, 6 serious. Canada, population 37 million, ranked 31, 276,274 cases, 3,237 new, 238 serious. Canada, 189,990 more cases than the People's Republic of China, and no challenge. Odd to you? The population alone dwarfs ours, right? Just absolutely dwarfs our population. So you would think that just by that virtue, like it's the reason that people shrug when talking about the US numbers, because their population is so much bigger than ours, that it is, those deaths in context make sense because it's about the same rate per 100,000 or something like that. It's similar, and even less, I think, than Canada. We're doing very poorly on every level, economic level, with regard to the response, on a personal level, a people level, a freedom level, everything. We're doing terrible. CTV News is reporting new closures will be fatal for thousands of small businesses, advocate warns. Small businesses that survived the pandemic so far are now at risk of permanently closing if governments don't do more to help them stay afloat in the second wave, with big corporations such as Costco and Walmart set to benefit most from shutdowns, according to a leading business advocate. I don't believe any of these experts. Like, they're experts. The health people they get are from universities, which are not doing a good service of maintaining our historic culture. I'll just leave it at that for right now, and are really highlighting socialism and collectivism, and it's a very, very, very interesting thing. But these leading business advocates aren't actually advocating for good business practices at all. Back to this. Toronto has banned indoor dining and set a 10 p.m. curfew for all establishments, and gyms are restricted to a maximum capacity of 10 people, making it useless. In Manitoba, province-wide code red restrictions are taking effect Thursday that will force the closures of gyms, hair salons, casinos, and all businesses that are deemed aren't deemed a critical service. Grocery stores and pharmacies can remain open at 25% capacity. Like, that's unbelievable. There's no clarity. They don't really have a plan, and they can't give us a set date when we can reopen, he told CTV News. He's a restaurant owner in Toronto. Ryan Diaz owns an 11,000 square foot martial arts studio in Vancouver with a group fitness activities shut down. He's now considering selling his house to cover the facility's $28,000 in monthly rent. We're going to have to do whatever it takes, he said. The new restrictions come as Canada has consistently broken its daily caseload records over the past weeks, with Ontario and Quebec regularly reporting more than 1,000 cases per day. I'll point again to the deaths. Like, sure, we've got all these cases, but our deaths are not even a fraction of what they were in the first wave. And with that context, I don't understand how you can gleefully destroy businesses, right? Like, you're just destroying people's livelihoods, right? But listen to this. This is just egregious. COVID-19 transmission on flights extremely rare, Dr. Tam says. U.S. study finds flying may actually be safer than other routine activities like going to the grocery store. This is unbelievable. And I'm not saying like unbelievable as just throwing it out there as a thing. Like, this is not credible. It's not believable, right? Like, the virus doesn't know you're on a plane, right? It's recycled air, and you're sitting very close to people. Are you joking? Like, this is just insane. Canada's chief public health officer said today that there's little evidence, if any, of COVID-19 transmission among passengers traveling by air. Speaking to reporters at a COVID-19 briefing, Dr. Theresa Tam said that while Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, is aware of reports that some COVID-19 infected people have traveled to Canada by air, there have been few documented cases of the virus actually being passed to others traveling on the same flights. Oh, don't worry about those COVID-19 cases flying into Canada. Don't you worry about that. Just don't you leave your house. You're on a lockdown, Toronto. And if you've got a business, you should mortgage your house in order to make sure that your business is maintained until the next round of lockdowns when you won't have a house to mortgage anymore. Like, this is not credible. Back to this. In fact, Tam said, she's not aware of any in-flight transmission being reported to provincial public health authorities. We've not received any kind of report, she said, adding officials should relay that sort of information to her agency if they have it. I just don't believe Dr. Tam at all on anything. She's just not credible. And again, I'm not saying that COVID-19 transmits on flights. I'm saying that the numbers that they're using are being bolstered by flu, probably. Where's the flu this year? Is there any flu this year? Has anybody seen any numbers for flu? Is it still flatlined at 0? Right? I think that it has something to do with the lowering death rates too, because when a virus goes through and kills people who are weak, just like a pneumonia does, right? Like the original SARS was a bad pneumonia, a viral pneumonia. So if that happens here, maybe a couple months down the road, there's less deaths because, right? You see what I'm saying? And maybe that makes sense that the deaths are in long-term care facilities and are not in widespread in the community. It's wild. It's wild. Oh, don't worry about flying, but don't you dare have Christmas. Right? You could sit on a plane with strangers, but don't see your family for Christmas. You can just, you can get lost, Dr. Tam. Really? Wow. Anger. Okay, Leonard Roxon says, if this is a fact, why wear masks when sitting in an airplane? Gullible people swallow BS science. Tam says, I can sit with hundreds of strangers in an airplane without social distancing, but can't gather with people on the ground with social distancing? It lacks credibility because it's not believable, right? Like I mean, the mask thing, I understand why people believe it, because you would think that it would help until you understand how small the virus is, and then it's all just for naught, right? Here's an Army vet reminiscing for Afghanistan, and it says, he says, today I was scowled at several times with my medals and Papillon for not wearing a mask in public. Oh, and I have a legit exemption. One of them even quickly jumped away from me as I passed. People do that to me too. This is not the Canada I served years ago. I can't believe how much I miss Afghanistan. At least in that dangerous war zone, I could hang out with my brothers and show my face in public. I have no regrets. I would do it all again and am in no way bitter. Just sad that people still believe this is all for our own good. Yeah. Here's a modern COVID breadline in Winnipeg. It says communism continues in Winnipeg. Brian Pallister tells us he wants us safe and healthy. Yet to buy groceries, we are forced to freeze our bums off in November. Winnipeg gets to minus 40 in the winter. What will we do then? How is this humane, twisted, and torturous? Yes. Awful. Here is a quote from Adolf Hitler. It says, the best way to take control over people is to erode their freedoms a bit each day. 1,000 almost impenetrable reductions. This way they won't see their freedoms being removed until past the point where it can't be reversed. Are you wearing your mask, comrade? Are you wearing your mask? Lisa's still looking for a psychologist to say that these restrictive measures are best for childhood development and education. Masking, over-sanitizing, recess bubbles, fear messaging, class trips to the bathrooms, including students who are on their periods. Is this best practice, Mr. Lisi? I disagree. I don't think any of it's a good idea. But Mr. Lisi has been a disaster as education minister. An absolute absent disaster. What an abject failure. What a ridiculous person to have in that role. Unbelievable. Anyway, this is Liverpool. Thank goodness this hasn't rolled out yet. Just taking the kids to school. Don't worry about the mental health of the kids that will be isolated based on a possible 90% false positive test when perfectly healthy. And it's a military truck, and they get out of the military truck and they ask, what are you guys doing here? And I'm not going to play it, but I was hoping that it was going to update. But I guess my internet's being kind of wonky today, so very, very odd. Here is a former general. And during this clip, he talks about what hammer and scorecard are, and he describes them. I'm worried this is going to start playing at some point. Okay, that's done now. Hammer and scorecard. He talks about what hammer and scorecard are, and he talks about how hammer and scorecard only changed 3% of the votes to make sure that it wasn't obvious, right? Here's a deep dive, and this is from a user on the Donald.win, which is a replacement for the Donald Reddit subreddit that got removed from Reddit. And the .win thing is like, there's the Omega Canada.win, and there's other Canada.wins or Canada. Something or others that function just like Reddit, but it's independent of itself. Like I think just moderators can spin off their own one. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it exists anyway. So this guy dug into the Edison data. Now the Edison data, if you don't know what the Edison data is it's the data that the news feeds use on election night. So it's legit. It comes right from the counters, right? Like it's as legit as the networks have been for the past however long you want to believe that networks have been legit. But these are the numbers that are gone by to decide presidential elections and have been for a long time. So this guy made a script, and I'll read it here. It says he made a script to run through the data and gather all instances where votes switched from Trump to Biden. Lost votes means that the total number of votes counted decreased by that amount throughout the counting. I've only done states that used the Dominion voting system so far, but he's added all of them actually. Switch votes are votes that were taken from Trump and given to Biden. Lost votes are votes that disappeared during the counting from both candidates, and there might be overlap between switch votes and lost votes. So I'll explain how he did it too, because it's very interesting. Here he shows the picture of the data, and I think it's in JSON files. And so he's showing what the data is showing. And he says, you can see in that picture that Trump lost 3,096 votes. Those all went to Biden, but Trump also lost 2,324 votes. That went nowhere. These 2,324 votes were moved from Trump to Georgia. So it's not just that they're moving Trump votes to Biden, they're also distributing Trump votes around. And he says, here's another example. He says it's like this, and he gives the formula. And I'm not going to go through the formula. This is the formula that he's applied, and you can check it for yourself if you're interested. But I believe that this is legit. A lot of people think this is legit, so I'm showing you. And so he says, do the same thing for Biden, and you'll see that he gained the votes that Trump lost. So it calculates all of those things quickly, so he doesn't have to go through and do the math. He said, you made a program that basically checks every single change in the votes and does the above to check if the votes were switched, and that adds them up to get the total number of votes switched. So using the Edison data, the legit election data, this guy can prove and you can see it, like he sources it, right? Like the election night data is still downloadable, etc. You can download the JSON files. You can spin up his Pi file, running the same equations, and check for yourself if you're interested. But it's very, very interesting, very compelling, very compelling. I think that with that data, knowing that this Dominion system, the Dominion system was largely involved with switching votes, that it really casts a question on how deeply or how secure are Canadian elections, right? Here's Greg, and he says, guess who was in charge of the 2017 Conservative Party leadership race when Maxime Bernier had the leadership taken from him, handed to Andrew Scheer? They destroyed the ballots and recalculated the results. And it was Dominion, right? Like here's the Conservative Party praises the Dominion voting for its software. An election expert is raising security concerns and has condemned the party's choice to destroy the ballots, right? Dominion. Imagine if Max had won that leadership, but they wouldn't let him. And it has nothing to do with conservatives. It has nothing to do with dairy cartels. And it has nothing to do with anything other than out and out cheating. Out and out cheating by a system controlled by, I don't know who, but it is out and out cheating. And it's provable. Here's another, moving on to the economy, because I mean, that's delicious, right? Like that has huge implications for the American election, but it has implications in Canada, right? It has implications. How long have our elections been completely compromised? Because that's what this is. That's what this says. That's what is happening and has been happening for a while. This is not in dispute, but doesn't seem to be registering yet. It's interesting. I wonder if it will register. So moving on to the economy. I don't know if it'll register. Pierre Poilievre says we have a small population, and we have a very rich country in resources and oil, etc. We could spin up our economy if we were allowed to, but we're not, because the UN doesn't like that. We're not allowed to use our resources. That's against the environment or something. But the UN doesn't want that. So what we're doing is some post-national hellscape idea with a finance minister who doesn't really think that a budget's very important and who doesn't know how to draft laws well enough so that the first law she drafted in order to give rent relief was good, has delivered the worst result in the G7. So this another page in our graphic novel, the post-apocalyptic world we inhabit is trying to kickstart communism just the right way, right? And what's happening is that we're getting the most or the worst result in the G7. Worst jobs, most expensive, and that's a problem. That's a problem if you could understand what that means as we continue moving forward in time. Here's Pierre Poilievre.
That if the government tortures the data badly enough, it will confess to anything. But here are the facts from the OECD. The United States has unemployment of 7.9%. Canada has unemployment of 9%. In fact, Japan, Germany, France, and the UK, along with the US, all have lower unemployment than Canada. That is despite having by far the largest deficit in the OECD. This is the worst record around. What will the government do to reverse the disastrous damage it has done to our businesses and workers?
Member for Carleton.
Sorry, Mr. Poilievre, they don't answer questions they don't like, and that is a question that they just don't like. So you're not going to get an answer. You're not going to get an answer. Ontario is set to add $100 billion in new debt over the next 3 years with Ford Nation. Doug Ford blaming COVID-19. Oh man, that evil COVID-19. If only we could just let the businesses open. The debt and the continued debt is concerning because what happens with debt is debt gets more expensive to service. Debt service costs get out of control, and then services start to diminish, other services, right? As the debt service charge increases and becomes a larger portion than, say, education or healthcare, that becomes a problem. And then if borrowing costs go up, well, good luck. Good luck. So what do we do? We just use quantitative easing, man. How do we get people to borrow money in an economy like this? You destroy their business and then give them no option, right? Lockdown. Adding 100 billion. Let's add 300 billion. Who cares? Yahtzee, right? Who cares? I mean, who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody's going to stop him. Nobody cares about wearing masks. Nobody cares about children wearing masks. Nobody's asked about the psychological impact or is that good for development. Nobody cares. Everybody's saying COVID-19 is the only thing that matters, despite the fact that it doesn't kill as many children as the flu kills, right? COVID-19. But you know what Jagmeet Singh is worried about? Jagmeet Singh is worried about white supremacist groups. There are 300 plus white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups operating in Canada. Today, World Sikh Organization, Anti-Hate.ca, and I called on Justin Trudeau to establish a national action plan to dismantle them. Canadians have a right to feel safe. Stand with us. Could he send me a list of the 300 white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups? I'd love to see a list of them. And I would assume that you have an idea of membership numbers, right? So like how many members they have? 310? Like, how many people are we talking about here, Jagmeet Singh? And do you think that maybe there are other things to focus on in this climate, in this political climate that we're currently living in than white supremacists, like jobs and immigration and the implosion of our economy and a budget, maybe? A budget. You're a leader of a political party, for crying out loud. You race-baiting, hateful person. Unbelievable. That's more of the unbelievable I was talking about that I was talking about before. Okay. Canada. This guy says, we are not serious about public safety in Canada. A man convicted of trying to join ISIS has been granted overnight privileges after telling the Parole Board of Canada he wanted to visit a ski resort with his girlfriend. I'm not going to join ISIS this time. I just want to go skiing. Maybe you should have thought about that before you went to try and join ISIS. No? Okay. Here is Justin Trudeau waving to people. Spectators were not permitted at the ceremony due to COVID-19. You couldn't have 25 or 50. You couldn't have 100 people outside. It's outside. The COVID-19 excuse is wearing thin. And this will stop when we make it stop. This will stop when we stand up and say no. This will stop when business associations and city mayors and other groups stand up and say, this is crazy, you're crazy, and this is going to stop, and we're opening our business. And if you want to fine us, we're going to burn the fines and shove it up your... Yeah, because this is not how things should go. The consent of the governed is gone. This guy is... Oof, yikes. Dominion. Back to this. Ticketmaster is reportedly planning mandatory COVID-19 vaccine testing policy for concert attendance. Bye, Ticketmaster! I won't be attending concerts with you. I'll be buying direct or not going at all. You can take it and shove it where the sun don't shine also. Global News reports over 20 Legion branches closed permanently amid coronavirus. More on the brink. This was a problem before. It's an exacerbated problem now. No poppies. The sad truth is, again, this stops when we make it stop, right? And there are a lot of people who believe that the government is here to help, who are trusting of Justin Trudeau, who believe that we're on the right path, who don't see the impending disaster, who don't see anything other than what the mainstream news is selling to them. And is that okay? Well, I mean, I guess so, right? We live in a free country, kind of, sort of. You're allowed to consume whatever news you like, but it is quite concerning looking at the expense that our government, the spending that our government is engaging in, and the lack of results on every level. And I don't know how you keep this going indefinitely, right? And it seems like they want to keep it going indefinitely. It seems like they want to just keep the shell. They don't want to put a budget out. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to give documents. They don't want to give agreements for COVID spending documents. They don't want to do anything. Transparent. What an absolute joke. What a joke. And our news too, right? This is CTV. This used to be truthful, right? CTV truth tracker. Yes, the US election is over. No, Trump can't win. This is like contested at best. There is no office of the vice president or office of the president-elect. There is a president-elect, and that's declared by the Electoral College. It's not declared by Fox News or ABC or CBS or any of the news organizations in the United States. Or CTV, right? Like, yes, he can't win. I mean, these people are going to look foolish. I mean, regardless. I mean, maybe if Biden does win for whatever reason, but I doubt that. I think that this is kind of a big deal, but we'll see. I could be wrong, but I think this is kind of a big deal. And I think that it's a big deal that Dominion played a role in our elections, and I think it's a big deal that so many of our leaders congratulated Biden. That's trying to show legitimacy, right? Like the leaders of other nations congratulating the winner of an election is meant to show legitimacy in the election, legitimacy in the win. Who's the foreign power that's interfering in the U.S. election? Jagmeet Singh directly on election day was saying that there was a moral imperative to get Donald Trump out of office. Isn't that election interference by a foreign national, a foreign leader, nonetheless? A foreign leader is not allowed to go to India? Isn't that weird? Right? Isn't that something that piques your interest? Isn't there a reason that, well, I mean, there used to be a time where you wouldn't be able to print something like this if it wasn't true. And I guess we're past that now, right? That old convention, gone were the days, right? Used to be, kids, we had a free internet. Gather round, I'll tell you of Reddit in 2009. It's too much. It's changed. It's gone. It doesn't exist. The April Fool's Day jokes, the purple, the color, I don't know, there was purple and orange thing. I don't know. There was a whole thing. The button, pushing the button. Remember the button? There were some crazy things that happened on Reddit. And then the Secret Santa, and then it's just gone. It's gone. Anyway, I don't mean to reminisce, but the whole world we knew in 2009 is just gone, right? It's a very different place now. Very different place. Very, very strange. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.